continued unfortunate news continues to come out of there. A lot of great journalism, a lot of great reporting I've seen on MSNBC. Just getting deep into the communities and the various communities. For those who aren't familiar, particularly in Mayfield, Kentucky, the town that was hardest hit, does have a very large Latino community from Central and South America. They're going to be, facing some very unique challenges. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about, the type of unique challenges folks from the immigrant community face day to day. But, this, natural disaster, has lifted up, a community that has a large immigrant community that are going to be facing very unique challenges as all the folks in Kentucky that continue to be in our thoughts as the federal response continues to that catastrophe. So I did want to mention that before we get into to other news. To start off with the news, Miracle, is there anything you want to share?
I know locally people have been talking about Dr. Oz being in Pittsburgh. So again, we are barely winding down to election 21, and here we are already gearing up for election 2022. So it's very important that everyone comes together, and registers to vote and gets once again politically active. I know it seems like to be this exhausting cycle over and over again, but Pittsburgh is in play. We had a program a couple weeks ago talking about almost upwards of $1 billion to be pouring into Pennsylvania because of these elections. So reminding people to stay involved, stay activated. There's a lot of stuff happening. There's some stuff looking at what's going on with the local land bank, how we're going to have people staying in their homes during this time. COVID-19 is still ever present in our communities. So there's a lot of things going on that we have to focus on and fight for and advocate for. We'll be talking about that in a few moments as well. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what policies and what positions a lot of elected officials are going to take over the next 6 months, because there again is so much going on, including an announcement a few hours ago that student loans will not be paused again coming the next fiscal year. So starting in February, people have to repay their student loans again. So that is a conversation that people are mobilizing around. We're still waiting to see about the Build Back Better Act, what the Senate is going to do from there. So every day it's something. On top of that, our own legislature here in Pennsylvania it is returning to work, returning to session tomorrow. So we have so much happening in such a little time. And it's very important, again, that we stay civically engaged, even though it's the holiday season.
Yeah, absolutely. And in national news, there's been a lot of scrutiny around the documents that have been submitted by Mark Meadows, the former White House chief of staff under former President Trump. Had, up to a certain point, had cooperated with the January 6th committee in the House, and recently has decided to stop cooperating with the committee. Thus, the committee has began the formal process of holding Mr. Meadows in contempt of Congress, which could then eventuate in him being indicted for contempt of Congress. So as we continue to see direct links between the activists that were really at the forefront of the insurrection on January 6th, being directly in contact. There's definitely text messages, cell phone records, emails that show Chief of Staff Meadows being in touch with a variety of the various activists who have been called and questioned in front of the committee for their role in the insurrection. So I think as we continue to dig deeper into January 6th, the direct ties between folks that were in the White House and folks from the movement, that, whether it's the QAnon folks, whether it's the other right-wing groups, there's just clearly a direct line between many of these groups and the White House directly on January 4th and 5th into January 6th. I know you've been traveling, but I don't know if you had an opportunity to see any of that coverage, or even if in your travels in Europe, this is something that has made the international news.
Yeah, it's been fun because as soon as people are like, oh, you're an American, they do want to talk about, American politics and what's going on in Kentucky and different places. But a lot of people have questions about what's going on, why is it taking so long to get answers and information? And if people had such direct evidence of wrongdoing or collusion, why is it such a almost strain to get people to cooperate, to get people to talk, to move? So again, this is going to be a huge election issue, and I don't foresee anything going away because, again, people are still guaranteed for 2024. So that's what they're organizing on about the election. And so we're going to keep having these conversations, and hopefully we'll have some answers and something resolved to figure out how January 6th happened, who all was involved, what elected officials knew what was going on, and to what extent. But I don't foresee this winding down anytime soon, especially not before the spring primary.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's going to be very interesting to see, how the rest of the work of the committee plays out, and how the next several months, look, and in some other news, Pennsylvania State Senator Haywood, State Senator Haywood out of the Philadelphia area has released a Pennsylvania poverty report that is very interesting. We'll drop that into the comment section as well, and it has very, very, very powerful information. Talks about the economic and social impacts of lack of childcare, of low wages, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of transportation across the state, and how that impacts those trying to rise out of poverty into prosperity. So we'll make sure we drop that link into the comment section as well, so you can follow the work that Senator Haywood out of the greater Philadelphia area is doing. America, would you like to give us a quick rundown of tonight's show and who will be joining us?
Yes, we wanted to end this year talking about community. That's where we started off as One in Power, and that is where we're going to be ending, is talking about community action. There's a lot of stuff happening all across the country, and so we wanted people to get involved and support and to fight back. So we'll be talking with 3 different organizations today about what they are doing to fight and stand up for their own community and the changes that they are making. Our first guest is going to be Billy Reeves, who works at Casa San Jose. And tomorrow, actually, they are going down to the Capitol to join a march and a rally to change the way Pennsylvania law is working, to ensure that people have access to tuition support as well as driver's license, regardless of immigration status. And so with that, we want to welcome Billy Reeves to the program this evening.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. America, you want to start with a question?
Yeah, so can you just talk a little bit about Casa San Jose and some of the work that you do?
Yes, so Casa San Jose, we're a Latino resource center that was started in 2013 by the Sisters of St. Baden. We provide various resources to the Latino community across southwestern and central western Pennsylvania. Although our main office is over here in Beechview, here in Pittsburgh, we have 4 satellite offices across the region. We have one in East Liberty, one in Washington, one in Mooncrest, and one over in Ambridge. Now, through these offices, we provide various services to families. This could be simply, just providing diapers to a mother who just had a child. We also have plenty of youth programs where youth are able to interact. Part of our mission and vision is self-sufficiency. So we want to teach the community how to stand up for themselves, and also provide them the tools to become successful in society. In addition, we provide translation for legal documents, which is a big thing as well. A lot of our community members are going through their immigration cases. So, we'll help our community members through that process to streamline that process for them. And more importantly, for them to understand what is happening. Language barrier is the biggest thing, especially in this side of the state. So that's why our services are there to help them. We also offer mental health services. There's a lot of trauma that could occur from, their journey here to the United States. And because of that, we have two mental health workers, Jeanette and Sandra, that do a great job with helping our community with their mental health and ensuring that our community is well taken care of in that sense. And most importantly, born out of COVID, we also have a whole medical wing now where basically we provide vaccination clinics to the community. We've provided vaccines to over thousands of community members, but I know we can get into that later. But it's a little synopsis. And that besides all that, we also advocate for the community. We stand up for the community. We want to advocate for the community, but more in a sense, lift up their voices. I'm here to ensure that the community members can be heard by the legislators. It's not my voice, it's their voice. I listen to what issues affect them. And because of that, we're a community-led organization. I'll advocate the issues that will ensure that they have a better life here within the Commonwealth.
Thank you for that. Now, could you tell us, a little bit about what's going to be happening in Harrisburg tomorrow, and why this issue is so important?
So tomorrow, it actually is a very big action. Unfortunately, due to the fact that Pathway to Citizenship did not come into fruition on the federal level, it was decided among two of the most prominent statewide campaigns regarding undocumented issues. The driver's license campaign, which advocates for driver's licenses for the undocumented community here within the Commonwealth. Basically, the undocumented population, which is 180,000 strong within the Commonwealth, would be able to have access to obtain a driver's license, be able to have the means, to take the driver's test and be able to know the rules of the road. In addition to become insured, once they would be able to attain their driver's license. The driver's license bill, it's all about accessibility. It's about safety on our roads, and it provides much more safety to all drivers within the Commonwealth. Secondly, the tuition equity campaign, we advocate for the in-state tuition for undocumented students within the Commonwealth. So currently, undocumented students at public institutions have to pay international rate at a public college here within Pennsylvania. Now, international rate, that's forced many of our community members to basically take 1 or 2 credits at a time. And this is at CCAC, if they even can. So I'm not trying to out them. I'm just stating the facts. However, what we're trying to push for is basically more accessibility for our community. So basically, if this bill would be passed, it would allow for undocumented students, if they attend a high school, public or private, charter school or cyber secondary school for at least 2 years, or a GED program, and graduate that school or program, then they would be eligible for in-state tuition. And in addition, it would direct PASHE to make a separate financial aid application. So basically, they'd be able to attain state scholarships and grants as well. So basically, these two campaigns came together, and we thought of all the messaging, how to, kind of tie it together for more accessibility for the community. And basically, the purpose is we want to show the legislature that, we're still here. And despite, Pathway to Citizenship not coming to fruition, now it's in the state's hands. The state's hands has, the power to provide more accessibility to the community.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And Billy, for people who aren't really familiar with these issues, can you talk about the barriers that this creates for the clients that you serve, not being able to have a driver's license, not being able to obtain upper level education, and why it's so important that we all get involved in this campaign?
Yeah, of course. So for driver's licenses, you know, I think everyone here who's driving, watching this show can understand if you really take a second back and to think and like how important a driver's license is, and yeah, it's something you should not take for granted because being able to drive, it means you can go to the store without having any concern for your life, for your family. It means you can if you're caring for your parents who may be more elderly, you can take them to the doctor, you can take your child to school, and you can go on a road trip. You have the liberty to do what you want. Without a driver's license, one, it can hinder our community members from kind of having more accessibility to jobs. So basically, they're going to be kind of put in this area where they can't really leave because this is the only area they can access, whether it's through public transportation or other means, maybe ride sharing with another community member who does have means to drive. In addition, like I mentioned, we have community members, youth who have parents who are undocumented, who are citizens themselves. They worry that their parents are going to be stopped. And because of that, since they're driving without a license, you have an instant family separation right there. So, you have the fear of, family separation almost every day for these families of mixed status. And basically what this would provide is, it would provide more security for those families as well, and basically knowing that, now they have the right to drive, regardless if it's a special provision or not, they have the driver's privileges to drive within the Commonwealth. Now, it's a similar tune with tuition equity as well. Our youth specialists, Jose and Teresa, I give them, a big round of applause. They do a great job, working with our youth. And because of them, our youth are very successful. But I have to be honest, when a lot of youth that are undocumented, they realize their status and they realize, the barriers that creates for them, and basically being able to seek higher education, they kind of lose the will to even want to go to high school, and they lose the will to even want to graduate because what? They think, what am I going to do after this? All I'm going to have is labor opportunities. And that's a real tragedy because, we're really cutting off, a force that wants to work. They want to contribute to their communities. They want to contribute to the city. They want to contribute to the county, the state. And they're not able to because they're not able to access those opportunities, that higher education. And, just besides accessibility, cost as well. Like I said, we have families that are willing to pay thousands of dollars just for one credit at a time. That's how much they're dedicated to wanting to succeed themselves and succeed for their families. But cost, is a big thing. And, with 1576 being passed, it would allow for public colleges, especially CCAC, community colleges around here, to become much more accessible to the community. And in addition, with financial opportunities such as grants and scholarships and even just loans offered by the state, it could allow our community members to even fathom the thought of maybe going to a private college, maybe thinking of their dream college. It would give them that hope.
Thank you so much for that. And I know you talked at the very beginning that you do COVID-19 outreach and support for the community. Can you just talk about how the lack of driver's license accessibility also impacts the way people are able to get COVID-19 resources and why it's so important, again, that this legislation is passed?
Yeah, of course. Right when you said that, I knew exactly what I was going to say. Basically, we have in the eve of the pandemic, when the vaccine was just first introduced, we were having vaccination clinics kind of all over the county. In addition to the region, we had mobile clinics in Washington, Newcastle, up in Lawrence County, in Ambridge, trying to reach as many community members as possible that we work with. Right now, we have a vaccination clinic every Tuesday at our Beachview office from 9 to 12. Now, in terms of driver's licenses and how that hinders our community members' ability to get a vaccine, it's pretty much in the question. They don't have a car. And because of that, if they don't really understand public transportation, the system itself, because of the language barrier, then basically they're not going to have any accessibility to get to our office to receive the vaccine. So, because of that, we provide over 500 rides to community members to our clinics, not just the one we have on Tuesdays, but to our various clinics to ensure that they're able to be vaccinated, when they want to. We want to provide that accessibility, and we're not going to let them not having a driver's license prevent that.
Thank you for that. And as we mentioned in the opening remarks, we talked about the devastation, in Kentucky, and how some of the great reporting that's been going on has been able to enlighten many of us around the country of the diversity, in a town like Mayfield. Can you just talk a little bit from your perspective, just like, because I just feel like there's such a parallel between trying to contact and access, various services, day to day in the community. You just talked about many of those barriers. So you just for the folks tuning in, can you talk a little bit about, what are some of these communities down in Mayfield, that have potentially language barriers, that potentially have, like you says, a mixed status, like households, how that, not only day to day, how these can pose obstacles, but what types of obstacles can they pose in the face of a tragedy like we're seeing in Kentucky?
So, in terms of the communities in Mayfield, that's what you're saying,
right? Yeah, absolutely. So, that are very much like the communities that you serve here in Western Pennsylvania.
No, correct. I mean, this is something that I've discovered through working through Casa San Jose. Nonprofits are key in providing that link between services that are provided by public institutions and the community. If it isn't for nonprofits, especially that have much more ingrained connections with the community, they're the ones that are able to, connect the community to services that are much needed. The language barrier is the biggest concern. And because of that, if I were, the municipal authorities down there or even the state, I would be sending interpreters of every language that you knew were in those communities. Because the language barrier, it can be simple, but it could also be great in the same sense. It could be just one little, detail that needs to be worked out, but that could mean you gain the service or not. So, if I were them, if I were the state or the municipal authorities, I'd be trying to garner as many interpreters as possible to understand what the needs are of the communities there in Mayfield, and then assess how they can service the communities down there. But like I said, nonprofits across the country, they're ones that connect with the community and able to connect community members to those services. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That was fantastic. Now, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing more, about your efforts. The best of luck tomorrow. We did include in the comment section a link, to your petition. We're calling on the state legislator. We're calling on the governor to let Pennsylvania drive forward. That link is in the comment section. So we're asking everybody to click on that, fill out that petition. I will be filling out my petition after the show. And, I really encourage everyone else to participate. But again, Billy Reeves from Casa San Jose, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to being in touch and continuing to figure out ways that we can partner and support the very important work that you're doing here in Western Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much. I look forward to talking again on the show, and I really appreciate both of you having me on tonight. I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to our Facebook event for the March.
Okay.
So if anyone's interested last minute, we'll be leaving at 4:30 tomorrow from Beachview. So the festivities start at 9 o'clock in Harrisburg, so you got to be there on time.
That's right. Yeah, thanks so much, and travel safe. Best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, that's Billy Reeves from Casa San Jose discussing a very important action day that they're going to have at the state capitol tomorrow, advocating for a driver's license for immigrants, as well as equity in tuition access and access to affordable tuition for immigrant students here in the state of Pennsylvania. So now we're going to move to our next guest, Miracle. Can you give us a quick rundown on our next guest and and talk about who will be joining us and what will be the topic of our discussion for our second segment.
Yes, and I'll just let our listeners know that for the next two segments, the topics may be a little bit heavy. So can just consider this like a blanket trigger warning. We're talking about police violence and state violence for the next two topics. But last week, there was a local article that was released that talked about how an individual has spent over 4 years waiting to go to trial after being shot by police. And so, to talk a little bit more about the situation that's going on here in Pittsburgh and to give some insight about some of the criminal justice matters, we're going to welcome Brittany Hailer to the program, who is a local journalist, also a professor in journalism, and a writer with the Pittsburgh Institute of Nonprofit journalism, and who does a lot of writing about incarcerated individuals. So, welcome to the program, Brittany. We're good.
Sorry.
But yes, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know you have a lot going on with the end of the semester, but to start off, can you just talk to us a little bit about the Institute? What is it? What does it do? And what are some of the stories you have been able to uncover just in the few short weeks that y'all have been in existence?
Yeah. So the Pittsburgh Institute for Nonprofit Journalism was founded by myself, Mary Niederberger, and Jody DePerna. We launched in the fall of this year. We are made possible by our fiscal sponsor, who is the Alternative News Foundation. And they're making a concerted effort to help sponsor small micro newsrooms across the country in order to kind of save journalism right now. We are a tiny, tiny little entity, which actually gives us some freedom. We do not have aspirations to become a daily paper. We hope to focus on the stories that aren't necessarily being covered, which includes the stories of those that are incarcerated, stories about Pittsburgh public schools, interviewing writers of color whose books have come out that maybe people don't know about yet. Our first series that we launched was funded by the Education Writers Association, and it looked at how students in higher ed navigate their disability. We just got funding from the Grable Foundation to investigate learning gaps in Pittsburgh public schools after the pandemic, or we are still in a pandemic, but and all the while I've been sort of digging into the conditions of the Allegheny County Jail. And yeah, that's what we're doing right now.
And before we get into the topic that you just mentioned, criminal justice and the important work that you've been doing, you said something that really struck a chord. You said that, one of the goals of the work that you're doing and the entities that are funding, your work are to save, journalism. Can you just talk a little bit about, the impacts of the changing landscape, in journalism over the last generation, and why it necessitates, very hard hitting, independently funded, independent journalism, like the work that you're doing. What kind of situation has created that, and why is it so important to have the kind of journalism that you do in the current media landscape?
Yeah, I don't think it's a secret that we are facing just media buyouts, layoffs, certain folks buying a newspaper and deciding editorially what's happening, feeling beholden to perhaps advertisers or different funders. And the pandemic really, really hit, the journalism institution. A lot of us didn't survive, and this seems to be the way to sort of get that to keep doing it and keep shining a light into opaque systems. I mean, we are the other arm of government, and we want to keep being a watchdog. And these foundations and these funders and these donors that are supporting us, are signing up for that and knowing that when they come to us that we are going to be independent, that we are going to dig into the thing. And they're supportive of that work. And it's been really encouraging, actually. It was really scary to take this risk and do this. And we've actually been really encouraged, and people really want good news. The flyby headline sometimes doesn't get the story right. And in the case of Todd Robinson, I know we're going to talk about that, but when you report out of the police report, you don't get the full story often. And centering the incarcerated person, you find out more. And that's kind of been our mission in every facet, whether it's education or arts or mental health or disability, is going and finding that community member and asking them, what do they think about the system? And it turns out that they have a lot to say, and they actually have a lot of insight. So I know that was kind of tangential, but
yeah, that's a lot of great insight. One of the things that I've seen over the past couple of years, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Miracle, is, you know, even in the wake of, daily newspapers becoming, less than daily, for lack of a better term, and what you talked about, media conglomeration, I do feel as though the nonprofit independent journalism, has in some ways, led to a more informed citizenry than we even had before, when we had, less media conglomerations and daily newspapers. Because over the years, I've followed a lot of the research that's come out of the Lear Center at USC, and they always talk about how little civic information is shared on local news broadcasts. And that's not a knocking on our broadcast
right.
outlets, but it's all over the country, where it's very, very little of a 30-minute local newscast is spent on civic information. I feel as though, as things have gotten to where they've gotten to, that creates this crisis. In the midst of that crisis, I do feel over the last several years, having the work that you're doing and other of your counterparts has created a situation where I think in some ways, at certain micro levels, we may have a more informed citizenry than we had. I think people know a lot more about the criminal justice system locally now than they did 5 years ago, when we had a daily newspaper, about what's going on in the jail, and the work that not only you were doing, but at Public Source, at the Current, at some of the other at the City Paper, and some of the other outlets that have really put a microscope on some of these issues that you can't really cover in a 30-minute 10 o'clock news broadcast or 11 o'clock news broadcast. But again, thank you for your work, and I really appreciate your insight. Miracle?
Yeah, no, I want to, first of all, I could never do broadcast news, because every time I've gone on, I was sweating and panicked, and I don't know how they do it. Like, how quickly they have to remember something and say it right is incredible, and I don't know how they do that. But I think too, just readership. I mean, people want to read this. People are interested in our jail. They're interested in our police departments. They're interested in our public schools, and they are hungry for this information. And they're so informed now that there is a consumer. I mean, I hate to use it in those terms, but people want, and how lucky are we to use it at a local level where it's the most impactful, to really dig in on something like locally and talk to our neighbors about our neighbors and make sure the community is as informed as it can be. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much for that, Miracle.
And you've mentioned Todd a couple of times. Can you just talk a little bit about his case and how this story came to be? Because a lot of people wait a minute, I thought jails only house people for 6 months to a year. How does someone stay in a local jail for 4 years?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer why he has been a pretrial detainee for that long. That was something that is a big question mark. For me personally, I'm not sure how that happened. But he has been awaiting trial since 2017. When in 2017, he was in Wilkinsburg and was going to visit a friend's auto body shop really early in the morning. And he was leaving another friend's house, and he didn't want to drive all the way back to where he was going. So he just parked his car in an alleyway and took a nap. And sometime later, 2 Wilkinsburg police officers were ticketing, parked cars, and they wrote up a parking ticket for his vehicle. And when they went to put that ticket on the window, they saw Mr. Robinson sleeping. And they woke him up and asked for his ID, and he handed his ID to them. They ran the license, nothing came back, and they let him go. I want to say, before I get into this next part, any previous reporting into Todd's case didn't include this parking segment. Everything that was reported, if you had Googled Todd Robinson before we wrote the story, it would have said ex-con was running from police in Wilkinsburg and was shot. So I just want to preface that. The dispatch came back and said that Mr. Robinson had violated his parole because he had not returned to a halfway house that he was staying at as a condition of his parole, and that his record, he had served 20 years for homicide. With that information, the police made some assumptions about whether he was violent, etc., and they went on looking for him for an hour in Wilkinsburg. Meanwhile, Todd went to McDonald's to have breakfast and was in the McDonald's when Officer Christopher Duncan and Matthew Morrison secured the perimeter of that parking lot. Todd exited the restaurant and got into his car. There was a lot of conflicting accounts about what happened next, but what we do know is that Morrison and Duncan fired multiple shots into this vehicle and struck Mr. Robinson. In that 15 seconds, Mr. Robinson backed up and hit a police car and then fled the parking lot. His position is they were going to kill me and I was fleeing out of fear. The police's position is that he was trying to kill them. He leaves, he's bleeding out. He crashes in front of the Family Dollar in Wilkinsburg, collapses into some bushes. He is found and arrested. He's critically injured and taken to UPMC Mercy. And after that, I wrote down his list of charges and I wanted to make sure that I had them right. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. He has been charged with 10 criminal charges, 2 counts of aggravated assault, possession of a firearm, criminal mischief, carrying a firearm without a license, fleeing or attempted elude of the police, reckless endangerment, vehicle or property damage, and reckless driving. For those 2 counts of aggravated assault alone are a minimum of 10 years each. After this shooting, and he's been sitting in the jail since then. After this shooting, the officer who shot him was named Officer of the Year by the Teamsters local union. And he also shot another man 8 months later after he had shot Mr. Robinson. And that is the nutshell of the case. Sorry, but I wanted to get all that in. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Miracle.
Yeah, and so I know he has a hearing tomorrow. Can you just talk a little bit what the status of that is?
Yes. So his lawyer has filed what's called a 600 motion. It basically is saying that he had a right to a speedy trial within 180 days, and it's been 4 years. And his lawyer is arguing that Mr. Robinson should be released because of that. The other motion that is also being discussed tomorrow is that Mr. Robinson is filing a discovery motion for the footage of the McDonald's footage of the shooting. He says that the prosecution has this tape. He's never seen it. They've never given it to him. I'm not sure what the prosecution, if they think it exists, that's unclear to me. But I do know that they are going to ask for that tape and bring that tape up tomorrow as well.
Thank you for that. And is there anything else particularly about this case that the public should know about? That may have not been covered, in the current story that we have shared in our comment section that was covered in the Capital Star?
The only, those two big points were that this started with a parking violation. Robinson's defense argued that he didn't have to give his license over from the beginning. And they've also argued that the warrant that was obtained by police after the fact that discovered this gun that he says is not his also shouldn't be allowed to be in this case. And the other, the major point, I think, for him is that he has not taken a plea deal, and he will not, because he is very determined to prove his innocence. Something that Robinson has said to me over and over and over again is that I'm patient. And that's partially why there's a lot of factors as to why he's been awaiting trial this long. But I think it's that he will not budge, and he will not take a plea.
Yeah, and I think it's also, he's not from Wilkinsburg, correct?
No, ma'am. I'm not sure exactly where he's from, though. Sorry.
Yes, I think it's also talking about someone from outside being out of jail for 4 years, but has no direct community family members or relatives. So it really has been relying on other people to amplify his story, to support him, to engage in kind of advocacy campaigns on his behalf. And right before, we let you go, you've done a lot of work about what's going on in the jail. I know it's not going to be enough for this next couple of moments, but can you just talk about some of the stories that you've been hearing and some of the common themes that you see when it comes to the local jail?
So I've been reporting pretty consistently on the conditions of confinement at the jail since Thanksgiving of last year. The first story that I sort of did, I reported on the jail in 2018, many years ago, but since the pandemic. And it started with the deaths of men in custody. And from there, I've reported on the jail's COVID-19 mitigation efforts or lack thereof, their lack of testing. I've also reported on the food conditions in the kitchen in the jail, which became this huge story that I did not expect, just finding one thing like a kitchen and, evolving out from there. I've also reported on the fact that the jail has kept incarcerated persons in their cells for 23 hours a day since the beginning of the pandemic. Allegheny County passed a referendum, as I'm sure you know, that banned solitary confinement. It's unclear how the jail is complying with that right now. But all of those stories sort of coincide with a lack of staffing at the jail. Every story that I've covered in the past year has something to do with either low medical staffing, corrections officers, not being able to work the whole pod, or lack of mental health care at the jail. And that sort of issue is borne out into these different subjects. The other pattern that I encounter all the time is lack of transparency. I recently did not win a court case against the county for the autopsy of an incarcerated person. The Office of Open Records granted me that autopsy, and the county took me to common pleas court. It was determined that because I'm not a lawyer, I cannot determine liability of our county. So we are going to appeal that. So that's one thing. I've been denied records of releases. I've been denied policy records. And the county has not responded to my request for comment in almost a year. I email and call, and they do not respond. So there's this, it's sort of chipping away at the wall all the time and hoping to break into that opaque system. And often, again, centering the testimony of those incarcerated who are the experts, actually, of the system is how I'm able to do that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your efforts. Really appreciate it. You've done so much to shine a light, on some issues that often are invisible, with folks live in their everyday life. So I think you've played a significant role in making our citizenry, even more and more informed than they've been. And like you said, they refer to, your area as the fourth estate. So, that you really can't have a functioning democracy without an independent, media, independent press. So thank you so much, Brittany Hailer from the Pittsburgh Center of Nonprofit. Was it the Nonprofit Center?
The Pittsburgh Institute of Nonprofit Journalism, which is super long, so you could just say pitch if it's easier. But I want to thank you guys for always promoting our work and being champions of local journalism. One Hood Power is amazing, and you guys really do help us with our bullhorn and all of us who work in local journalism. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you soon, and happy holidays.
We do. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that was Brittany Hailer from the Pittsburgh Institute of Nonprofit Journalism. I thank you so much for that enlightenment and that very, very important coverage of a very, very, very troubling story, a miracle. Tell us who is going to join us for our third segment of the show. I think we've had a very, very excellent show. Thank you so much, Billy Reeves. Thank you so much, Brittany Hailer, for joining us. And now Miracle for our final act of the final live One Hood Power Hour of the year of 2021. Who do we have and what will we be talking about?
Yes. So again, this is going to be a very difficult conversation. Last year on June 2nd, Ashely Monterrosa was shot by police. It was revealed that he was on his knees with his hands up and was still shot. And just this week, we have learned that the officer who committed the act of violence was recommended to be terminated. Still hasn't been gone through all of the prosecutions and arrests and things. And so to talk about their fight for justice, to talk about everything they have done to make sure they are able to get justice for Sean, please welcome Sean's sisters, Ashely and Michelle, to the program.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Miracle?
Yeah, and so like I said, the news came this week that the officer who shot your brother is going to be terminated. Can you just talk about how your family is dealing with everything right now, and after over a year of fighting to get some answers, what this decision means to you all?
Well, first and foremost, we just want to say thank you for giving us another opportunity to share our story. Last week, we got the news from this group, the OIR group here in California, who is invited by the police department to conduct a thorough investigation. And in their findings, they found everything we've been saying for the past 18 months on how Officer Jeriton, what he did to my brother, he had no reason to shoot and murder my brother, but specifically shooting him from the backseat of an unmarked pickup truck, not even stopped. And when we first got the news, it was almost like, wow, thank you guys for doing this investigation. But at the end of the day, we're happy to know that they got it right this time. A lot of times you hear these third-party investigations always justify when an officer murders an unarmed civilian or even anybody. So it was just a lot for our family. It was an emotional day, but it's been an emotional past 2 weeks, to be honest. Once the OIR group report came out, the next day we saw the termination letter that Jeriton was served by Chief Shawnee Williams of the Vallejo Police Department here in California. So things have been moving in our favor, and we wouldn't be able to do any of this work without the community support, our mom's prayers. We're really a praying family, and just that's what grounds us day to day. And it hasn't been easy. And I'll let Ashely share a little bit.
Aside from the OIR report findings and the termination letter being served to Jeriton, we also have the blessing of getting Attorney General Rob Bonta here in California to take on our brother's case for criminal charges. And hopefully he concludes his findings and his own personal investigation with his office hopefully before the 2-year anniversary, maybe even sooner. But we know that if the OIR group is getting this right, we know that Attorney General Rob Bonta has to get it right as well.
Thank you for that. And will there be any pursuit of any in civil proceedings? And I understand, how the legal system works. All criminal proceedings must be, resolved before any civil case. But is that also something that your family is looking into?
So our family is being represented by Lee Merritt in the civil case right now. So that's still, I think, in works. Me and Ashley don't really know what's going on that, as that's a conversation with our parents and our attorneys. But we are pursuing everything we can, and for our family, what it truly means to bring justice is, us being the last family affected by the Vallejo Police Department. Since 2012, there's been 18 unarmed men who've been murdered by all these officers. They're coined the Fatal 14. There's 14 police officers in that department who have at least murdered one or two more unarmed civilians. So it's a really small town. We're born and raised in San Francisco, so it's just about 40 minutes out of San Francisco. So, media doesn't always pay attention to what happens in the city of Vallejo. So, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of spotlight, and we just hope that we're doing everything in our power to be the last family affected.
Thank you so much for that rundown. I'm a big hip hop head, and us, at One Hood Power and One Hood Media love hip hop. So we've been following E40, for many years. You know what I mean? He put the city on the map. So shouts out, to E40, and the whole crew. Much love, and again, thank you, for sharing your story and giving us some background, on the city that you're from, and joining us from so far away. And so, talking a little bit, about, your city. What do you think it was, in your brother's tragic case? And I thank you just so much for your courage and everything that you're doing in wake of such tragic event. But clearly there was a trend, in your city. What do you think it was about your brother's case that maybe it becomes the one that really brought the change that has been needed for years? But what was it about that incident, or maybe the activism that you did and the organizing you did, but made it something that got bigger than the borders of your city, and something that not only in California we're looking at, but here even in Pittsburgh and around the world?
Right.
I think, it was in the midst of the George Floyd uprisings and people, standing up in solidarity with George Floyd, following Breonna Taylor as well. I think it was the timing, and us being from San Francisco, a much bigger city that's well resourced, and we are well connected with folks in our community, that when our brother did pass away, we went boots to the ground in Vallejo. We caravanned, we marched down Vallejo. We did so much that I feel like we were able to have that big of an impact because of our community and because of social media. Social media was super helpful, especially around that time where you just, that whole summer. And unfortunately now it was kind of like a trend back then, versus now the numbers aren't really on the street like they used to be. But when you would just put an ask out onto social media, people would pull up, and people would pull up in numbers. So I think because we had that pressure from the jump, we were able to be consistent with the continuous support of like the Gathering for Justice and all these other organizations that have been supporting us since day one.
And another thing we want to recognize is that one of the things that our mentor has taught us, Carmen Perez, is one of the principles of King and Nonviolence is suffering. And sometimes we have to suffer a little bit for a bigger cause. And on Sean's 4-month anniversary, we got arrested at Governor Gavin Newsom's home, just demanding for something to happen. The local DA recused herself. Nancy Pelosi called out the FBI of Sacramento to investigate Sean's case.
No one wanted to take on the case.
The Board of Supervisors of San Francisco sent a letter to the city of Vallejo to release the name of all the officers involved.
So we said, you know what, let's just take it to the streets and let's get arrested and do some civil disobedience. Sometimes we got to suffer a little bit for a bigger cause to achieve a greater goal. And we were held in county jail in Sacramento for about 23 hours, but eventually we did get a statement from Gavin Newsom. Eventually, with pressure, Attorney General Javier Becerra stepped down, and then we got Attorney General Rob Bonta, who did take on the case finally, and so that's where we are now. But it's been a long journey of nonstop work, and we're just now barely starting to stop and heal and do some internal heart work and healing work, because it's exhausting, and we know that we can't get burnt out because we do have a long journey ahead of us.
Yeah.
Just before we go to you, Miracle, I just want to say quick shouts out to Carmen Perez and the gathering, Mr. Belafonte. I was at the first gathering back in 2005 in Epps, Alabama. Was at the one in Santa Cruz. With the whole crew out in Santa Cruz as well. So not much love to the gathering, but Miracle, to you, I just want to give a quick shout out. She brought up some of the good folks that we need to lift up, as much as possible.
Yes.
And you've been out here, like I said, going boots to the ground, getting people to organize and support your family. A couple of questions. What does justice look like for you? I know you said that you don't want other families to experience what you're going through, but for your family, I know everyone has like different interpretations, parents and siblings. But what does justice look like for you? And is there anything you feel comfortable in sharing about your brother that you would like people to know? Because again, like you said, sometimes the media is not always on your side, and what they report is not always the best picture. So what is something that you would like people to take away knowing about your brother?
Aside from what we've mentioned about what justice looks like to us, justice also looks like healing. A lot of the times you see impacted families, people like us, just coming from a place of pain, but we have to learn how to come from a place of healing and love. And with coming a place with healing and love, we have to take that time to maybe set up retreat centers, and where families and folks can heal and do that internal healing work to then bounce back and continue working for their cause.
But aside from that, what we've done is bring into action not only on the streets, we're on the legislation on the back end. California was one of 4 states who didn't have a process to decertify police officers. This year, SB2 police certification in California was passed and was signed into law September by Governor Gavin Newsom. So, we've seen milestones. We're seeing the policy, the back end stuff working in our favor. And, there's another bill we're supporting, SB 299, which will provide victims compensation to all families affected by police violence. So we can start breaking those barriers that are set up against us. So that's kind of like what justice looks like, just creating more laws and policy, departmental changes that can actually change what's happening. I feel like a lot of times if we don't try to work, on the laws and policy ends, we don't always see things be effective. So,
sometimes you got to play the inside outside game, like Carmen taught us. But for our brother, I was a baby sister. Michelle's the oldest, and Sean was the middle sibling. So for me, he was my second dad. Whenever my dad was, immigrant families, your parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, just to make a way. And my brother really was like my second dad, trying to raise me, taught me what I know. Like, I am who I am because of my brother. He just laced me with like hella game. And so that was me. But he was my protector and all that. But I'll pass it on to Michelle.
But overall, he was just wanted to provide so much for the family. He might have looked hard on the outside, but was super sweet on the inside. And one thing he told me and Ashely always was, take advantage of every resource that's given to you, because you never know. You never know who you're gonna meet. You never know something. So he really fulfilled his dreams. He always wanted to be a carpenter. He wanted to buy my parents a rundown home and fix it the way they wanted it. But he was able to, at least be able to be a carpenter. So me and Ashely are doing everything we can, and his legacy and his memory lives through us. Sometimes it's hard. We don't have to wear our scars on our chest all the time, but we're just learning to create a happy life for ourselves too. And hopefully we can see a lot of change, but we have to also heal ourselves for the marathon that continues.
Yeah.
One quick question I had before we go back to Miracle. Were you involved in any form of activism, before this tragedy? And go ahead.
I was going to say, so being born and raised in the Bay Area, in San Francisco specifically, it's already kind of taught us in our academia. So from a young age, teachers started teaching us how to do walkouts, but I don't think for us personally, we weren't thinking, we were activists in our own ways, but we weren't like full on the way we are, you know.
Prior to my brother's death, I was a youth ambassador and doing community-based work in Uruguay and South America for a summer. Then I went to the protesting against the School of the Americas down in Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Mexico, and to like shut down ICE detention centers in Eloy in Arizona. So we've been doing a bunch of stuff, but this time it became personal on June 2nd. Yeah. So since then, we've been running with this baton. You know, our brother's last text message to us was to sign a petition to get George Floyd justice. And then 40 minutes after, he was gunned down. So it was like that, you know, figuratively speaking, he passed us a baton, and here we're trying to get justice for him.
Yeah.
Wow, it's powerful. Miracle? Miracle, you're on mute.
I know you talk a lot about like healing and support for families who are going through what you're going through. Do you have any words of advice? I know you said you're coming up on 2 years, you know, next year, and so you're still freshly going through it and you're really in it. But do you have any like words of advice or wisdom for families who are recently going through what you're going through?
I think most importantly, just take time with yourself. You know, these rush of emotions come at any time. You know, really try and have community there for you, because the worst thing is, you know, when you're affected by this violence, you know, and you don't feel like you have anyone behind you, even sometimes your own family. So, you know, just really sitting with your emotions and being present, you know. But one thing we do want to eventually create, you know, is a law, like we said in California, victims compensation for families affected by police violence. And I hope that it's a law that can also be implemented in every other state, you know, not just in California, but for families affected by police violence to be seen as survivors and, you know, not be treated the way that we are.
And for me, I would say you're not alone. Definitely take time to heal, because I wish I took the advice of people telling us to rest before we get burnt out way sooner. Here we are a year and a half later, barely trying to take time for ourselves. So, you know, taking time for yourselves is very important to continue on this journey.
Thank you so much. I just have one quick final question on my end. Like I mentioned, you know, I was you know, had the privilege to be invited, you know, to the initial, you know, gathering. Can you talk about how were you connected with Carmen Perez, you know, in the gathering? Can you talk a little bit, you know, about who Carmen Perez is and the gathering, and were you already connected, you know, with that work prior, you know, to the tragedy, or was that a connection that was made in the wake of all the challenges you and your family are facing?
That was a connection made by God, the universe. 2 weeks after our brother passed, she DM'd the Justice for Sean Instagram page that we have. And we exchanged numbers. She said she wanted to support us and figure out how she can help us out and help amplify Sean's story. Michelle's exchanged phone numbers with her. She had the wrong number for like a whole month, and then DM'd back, and then we finally gave the right number, and we were finally able to tap in with each other. And since then, it's been a blessing to have a mentor during this whole journey, because there's a lot of mistakes someone can make, especially I don't think we would have gotten this far in our case had it not been for the gathering and Carmen supporting us from day one, literally, and other organizations as well. But the gathering was founded by the legendary singer-songwriter, Mr. Harry Belafonte, and now the president CEO is Carmen Perez, Miss Lady Justice One on Instagram. And yeah, they work to close youth prisons, support families affected by police brutality like us.
And also she was one of the co-founders of the Women's March, you know, so we're little sponges in this space, you know, we're learning by so many greats, you know, as she tells us, you know, we're an extension of her and Mr. B. So, you know, we hope to honor everything we've learned through them, but, you know, to provide real support for folks as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as we wrap, is there we put the gatherings link, the Stand with Sean website in the comments. Is there anything that you need from the community to support, to help you keep getting these results for your family and for others?
I would just say continue to show up on Justice for Sean for Instagram, repost, like, comment, continue amplifying Sean's story. And then also support the gatherings work on Instagram, gather4 justice. And you can also follow NYC Justice League, where we also are members of, into other grassroots work and other states and wherever the movement goes, we also do that. So you can also support those pages as well.
But whenever we put a call out on the Justice for Sean, just make sure, to tweet, email, call, whoever we need, show up. And, I think collectively as a community, we've seen the fruit of all of our labor in my brother's case specifically. We wouldn't have been able to get any of these wins without the support of everyone. And everyone has, how Carmen always says, everyone has a lane, and everyone's playing their lane, playing a role in their lane. So, it's been a collective win.
All right. Well, Ashely and Michelle, we do thank you so much for joining, us this evening. Obviously, we wish it was under, other circumstances, but thank you so much. And we, send love and prayers to you and your family. And we do hope that the investigation, that the Attorney General comes and rules in your favor as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye.
Thank you so much. And that's Ashely and Michelle Monterrosa from Viejo, California. I'm sharing a powerful, powerful story. We thank them so much for their courage and standing up for the legacy of their brother and taking, and not only, seeking justice for themselves, but, really transforming the landscape, of the city they live in and affecting change in the entire state of California. Very, very, very powerful, powerful story. So we definitely thank them for joining us tonight.
Yes, and again, the conversation, I hope everyone saw a theme through through all of our guests and talking about the way that, it takes community, it takes action, it takes all of us coming together and showing up and supporting each other to make change and to fight for justice, and even just to expose the truth and figure out what's really, really going on, whether it is writing, a paper and an article, whether it's doing advocacy work or even getting arrested on the governor's lawn. It takes a lot of support and strength for community members to really fight for each other and to affect change and create policy and legislation and force people to, approve it and vote for it. And so I hope people walk away or tune off tonight's broadcast with feeling inspired to go out and continue the fight for justice in various cases. And we know a lot's going on, but remind people tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you are in the Pittsburgh area, please go down to the courthouse at 9 a.m. to observe Todd's case. You can reach out to ALC Court Watch. That is ALC Court Watch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for information about where to go, what to bring, so that you are able to get into the courtroom, know the policies and procedures. In addition, this Wednesday at 1 p.m., I know we have a graphic coming up, but there is going to be a protest for people to come out and show support for Shantae and some other women of trans experience here in Pittsburgh as they're fighting to make their legal name, their names, their legal names, because here in Pennsylvania, there are laws on the books that prevent people from trans experience from changing their legal names if they have certain criminal convictions. As a reminder, changing your name does not erase your conviction, does not erase your past criminal history, but it does expose you to discrimination and transphobia and homophobia and bigotry, and it prevents people of trans experience from living their full authentic selves. And so we're rallying for people to come down Wednesday at 1 p.m. and show support and solidarity for these local women who are trying to affect change here in Pennsylvania. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kahari, who's going to talk about our holiday break.
Yes, so this will be our last show until Monday, January 3rd. We will be taking a short hiatus to enjoy the year-end holiday season. However, you celebrate this time or observe this time, rest is resistance. So, we'll be taking a break. But before we do that, there's a couple policy things I did want to mention. In Harrisburg this week, there's a focus on House Bill 1800. That is a election reform bill. It would move the deadline to register to vote back 30 days as opposed to the current rather 15-day deadline. It would eliminate all in-person early voting until 2025. It would also enact new restrictive in-person voter ID provisions, and it would also limit options for returning absentee and mail-in ballots, as well as other obstacles to voting. We'll drop some information about it in the comment section before we adjourn for the evening. And then also I did want to mention Senate Bill 913 around probation. It would the Senate Bill 913 would create a new form of probation called administrative probation for people who have failed to pay their restitution. People who fall in this category could be on probation indefinitely with no consideration for their financial circumstances. This could be another form of punishment for those who live in poverty. So we'll also have information about that. So two bad pieces of legislation, House Bill 1800 that would create some barriers to voting, as well as Senate Bill 913 that would create some barriers for those on probation to get off probation solely around financial reasons. So two things that definitely be on your radar. And as we go into 2022, we will be spending more time in our shows to talk about, specific pieces of legislation, whether good or bad, that really need to be on your radar. And House Bill 1800 and Senate Bill 913 are two of those types of legislations that should be on your radar.
Exactly. And again, as community in action was the theme for this evening, we hope you pay attention to what's going on with these bills. Call your elected officials, tell them to vote no because of the collateral consequences it causes for families. And as we saw just earlier, what can happen with these random tickets and these enforcements and how it entraps people in cycles of state violence and poverty. So again, it's just very important that you stay again in tuned with your civic engagement. And even if you're not registered to vote, you can always talk to your elected officials, even if you're just a resident or someone who's just very passionate about issues. You're always welcome to reach out to elected officials, have meetings with them, write them letters, talk to them on social media, and explain why this legislation is bad, regardless of political affiliation and background. So it's very important that all elected officials know what's going on and know how this impacts community and how communities do not want these bills to be passed. And with that, to take us out, I'll pass it over to Kahari.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, everyone, for watching for another year of the One Hood Power Hour. When we get up into the spring of 2022, we will be officially at 2 years. Definitely want to thank producer John. Thank you so much. Also, Gary, who always is on the help out as well. But definitely producer John, who's with us every Monday, helping provide us a platform to reach out to folks. So just really excited. Next year is going to be a lot going on. So definitely get used to us. We're going to start off the year with some previews from the local level to the state level, as well as looking at redistricting. We've seen some initial maps that have come out. Nothing has been set in stone yet, but over the next month, the next few weeks, we will be paying close attention to the legislative maps because it will have a great bearing not only here in Western PA, but around the state. And it could be a situation where it falls into the hands of the state Supreme Court, which could impact the timing of when the maps come out and what districts folks will have to run in. So stay tuned. There'll be a lot going on, but in the meantime, enjoy the holiday season, enjoy the end of the year, get ready for another intense year of political goings on at the campaign, as well as the issue and policy levels. So on behalf of my colleague, Miracle Jones, and the whole One Hood Power team, producer John, we want to thank everyone for watching us for another year and look forward to seeing you in 2022, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go. Thank you so much.